Well, hello and welcome back as always. This is episode number 11 titled My Search Course at College, Losing with comma, Bobby G and the Son of God. In my first semester at Central Connecticut State College, which is now a university, I took a search course. These were anomalous offerings that only transferred to other state colleges at the time. And the name of the course was Theater of the Absurd. So on my first day in class, we met our incomparable professor from London, Norman Asbridge. From first appearance, he was very eloquent, worldly, and seemed to be very at home with the world of British pubs, drinking, entertainment, and indulgence. He would relate to us that if we wanted to learn about the real world, you need to visit a pub in London. So after a brief introduction of himself and the concepts of the course, we dove right in, and I had no idea of what was about to happen. Theater of the Absurd is a style of theater based on existential writing and the absurd notion of life having little or no meaning, which plays with plays having no logic or proportion. Communication with this approach breaks down and the dialogue can appear vague and dreamy. The plays go off on tangents and there's a tendency for little or no resolution or ending. I was going to enjoy this course and professor. Absurdist writers include Eugene Ionesco, Samuel Beckett, Harold Pinter, and John Genet. Buster Keaton and the Monty Python group are also considered to be in the absurdist genre. So back to the classroom. Mr. Asbridge informs us that he wants one man and one woman to act a love scene on a couch, and he isn't looking for volunteers. So you kind of know what's going to happen here. He picks an attractive blonde woman, and to my surprise, he chooses me. I was not a good choice, and I was not only petrified, I was ill prepared. I had no theatrical experience, but she was magnificent, certainly not because of me. She was natural, comfortable, and graceful, and I was the opposite. So after my weak performance, he would go on, as he should, to have praised her for her poise and presence, so much that he met her after class, and who knows what transpired. And then he told me blandly, "Nice try, and you were a bit stiff." And trust me, he didn't give her accolades because of me. I had absolutely no impact on her performance. Well, I got over it and have to admit that it was one of the most memorable classes I ever took. And he was a gas, a lot of fun, spontaneous, boisterous, and quite unpredictable. Oddly enough, I was exposed to the British show Monty Python's Flying Circus, which would air on public television within the next year or so. And I, along with some of my other college buddies, fell in love with the show. I was right at home with the wacky, unpredictable, and complex humor, and I never had any issues with the theater of the absurd style with its unhappy endings, meaningless actions, illogic, ridiculous dialogues, banality, and tragic outcomes. Long live Norman Asbridge in Theater of the Absurd. Yet I Googled him recently, Mr. Asbridge, and sadly he passed away in 1998 at the age of 70. The universe is chock full of losers. It doesn't seem to love winners. It cleans things up quite well. We're around for a very short window, and that's why we relate to losing. Every coach of any sport knows that someone has to lose, and if you can't accept that, then you're in the wrong profession. Comedians know all about losing also. Comedy is based on losing. Winning isn't funny, losing is. If you're on the losing end and you actually feel somewhat comfortable losing, you'll most likely never become a comedian. No matter how hard you prepare and plan for the future, most things are not going to work out as planned. Read about chaos theory. Chaos theory is a branch of mathematics focusing on the study of chaos, dynamical systems whose apparently random states of disorder and irregularities are actually governed by underlying patterns and deterministic laws that are highly sensitive to initial conditions. You can tell I didn't write this part. Chaos theory is an interdisciplinary theory stating that within the apparent randomness of chaotic complex systems, there are underlying patterns, interconnectedness, constant feedback loops, repetition, self-similarity, fractals, and self-organization. And no surprise, I pulled this from Wikipedia. If you don't lose today, you'll lose tomorrow, and the universe doesn't give a crap about you. The countless permutations are wreaking havoc. Losing is very identifiable. 75% of humanity lives in dire poverty. In the time that I wrote these uplifting thoughts, hundreds of people died. Everyone loves a winner, yeah, but not for long. My wife and I were at Tony and Lucille's restaurant on Worcester Street, New Haven one night many years ago. and I ran into Bobby Garioso, who was one of my all-time characters that I knew from my Amtrak days. And as usual, he came through with a classic reply to my wife when I introduced him to her. He said, "Mary, I'll pray for you every night." Only Bobby would say that. Every Christmas, our church relates the story of Jesus' life. He was born in an obscure village, the child of a peasant woman. He was a carpenter until he was 30 years old. Then he was a preacher. He never wrote a book, never held public office, never had a family, and never owned a house. You could say that he was lucky. He never went to college, and I didn't know that there were colleges back then. Never traveled more than 200 miles from where he was born. He did none of these things that one relates to greatness. More than 2,000 years have passed, and he is still considered to be the central figure of humanity. But the one thing that they don't take into account here, he was the Son of God. They never mention that. I mean, doesn't that hold any weight? I mean, if I was the Son of God, I think it would mean something. And after all, he's the only Son of God that ever existed. It's got to get him off to a good start. Being afraid of death is like being at a party where you're having a great time and you wish you could stay, but you know you have to leave. Now, leaving the party is not that bad. And where you're going after you leave is not that bad either. You just don't want to leave the party. The self-help industry claims two separate selves, one that needs a kick in the ass and the other that is capable of doing it. So one that is powerless and the other has the power at the same time. It's kind of a contradiction. Someone somewhere claimed that there are only problems and solutions, but I don't agree. I feel that this is simplistic thinking. It's never that easy. Human relations can get quite tricky, and we may come up with a solution to a problem that creates another problem within the solution. Sometimes the solution becomes the problem, and sometimes problems work themselves out. Not all of them, certainly. You can resolve the problem and take a bow and find out that your solution wasn't as effective as you thought, and that another problem popped up unexpectedly that was within the solution. Oh, it's just too crazy, and I will stop here.